Every once in a while, something happens that makes us stop and question reality itself. A coincidence so bizarre, so impossible, that it feels as if the universe is playing with us. Are these moments just chance? Or is there something deeper, some unseen pattern connecting everything? Tonight, we're going to explore the most astonishing coincidences in history. Some of these stories will make you question probability, others might send chills down your spine. But one thing is certain, after hearing them, you'll never look at life the same way again. Let's begin. The curious case of the identical twins in 1940. Two twin brothers were separated at birth and adopted by different families. Neither knew about the other. But what happened next defies all logic. Both were named James. Both grew up loving math and carpentry. Both married women named Linda. They both had sons, one named James Allen, the other James Allen. And after divorcing their first wives, both remarried to women named Betty. It doesn't end there. They both drove the same car model. Both had the same smoking and drinking habits. Both worked as part-time law enforcement officers. When they finally met in 1979, the world was stunned. How could two people, raised separately, mirror each other's lives so perfectly? Was it genetics? Was it destiny? Or something else entirely? The tragedy of the Hoover Dam. When the Hoover Dam was built, thousands of workers took part in its construction. But one story stands out. The first person to die during its construction was a man named George Tierney, who drowned on the 20th of December, 1922. The last person to die during its construction? His son, Patrick Tierney. He also drowned. On the 20th of December, exactly 13 years later. What are the chances? Could it be mere coincidence, or was there an eerie connection between the two deaths? The Titanic's uncanny prediction. Everyone knows the tragic fate of the Titanic. But what if I told you that its disaster had been predicted 14 years before it happened? In 1898, an author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novel titled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. The story was about an unsinkable ship called the Titan. Like the Titanic, it was the largest of its kind. Like the Titanic, it set sail with far too few lifeboats. And like the Titanic, it struck an iceberg and sank. The similarities don't stop there. Both ships were around 800 feet long. Both carried roughly 3,000 passengers. Both sank in the North Atlantic. The book was written years before the Titanic even existed. Was this just a chilling coincidence? Or did Robertson tap into something beyond explanation? The Lincoln-Kennedy connection. Two of America's most famous presidents, separated by a century, yet their lives were connected in ways that seem impossible. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. Both were succeeded by men named Johnson, Andrew Johnson, born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, born in 1908. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater. Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln car, made by Ford. Both assassins were known by three names: John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. And here's where it gets even stranger. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and ran to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and ran to a theater. Coincidence? Or an unseen pattern repeating itself? The stranger on the train. It was 1920. A mother and her infant daughter boarded a train in Germany, fleeing the chaos of post-war Europe. In the commotion, the baby was accidentally handed to another passenger and separated from her mother. Despite desperate efforts, they never found each other again. Years later, the mother emigrated to America. Life moved on. Decades passed. Then, one fateful day, she was riding another train, this time in New York. She struck up a conversation with a woman sitting across from her. There was something familiar about her. It turned out, this woman was her lost daughter. After more than 40 years apart, a random train ride had brought them back together. Was it just luck, or was something guiding them toward each other all along? A bullet's journey through time. In 1893, a man named Henry Ziegler broke up with his girlfriend. Heartbroken, she took her own life. Her brother, furious, swore revenge. He tracked Ziegler down, aimed a gun, and pulled the trigger. Ziegler fell. The brother, believing he had taken his revenge, turned the gun on himself. But here's the twist: Ziegler wasn't dead. The bullet had merely grazed his face and lodged itself into a tree behind him. Thinking he had cheated fate, he went on with his life. Years later, Ziegler decided to clear some land. That same tree still stood. To remove it, he used dynamite. The explosion sent the bullet flying straight into his head. The bullet that was meant for him years earlier had finally found its target. A book's hidden future. In 1913, a man named Franz Richter bought a second-hand book in a Berlin bookstore. Inside, he found scribbled notes and doodles from the book's previous owner. It was an old poetry collection, nothing special. Years later, in 1941, Richter was stationed in France during World War II. One day, while walking in a small village, he wandered into a bookstore. He picked up a random book and froze. It was the same poetry collection he had bought nearly 30 years earlier. And inside, in the exact same handwriting, there was a new message written on the last page. It read, "Some books find their way home, no matter how far they travel." How had the book traveled across continents, survived the war, and found its way back into his hands? History is filled with these stories, coincidences so strange, so impossible, that they make us question whether anything is truly random. Some say these are just statistical anomalies. Others believe they are signs of something greater, a force, a pattern, a connection we can't yet understand. What do you think? Is life just a series of random events, or is there a design hidden beneath the surface? Let me know in the comments. And remember, sometimes, the most incredible stories aren't fiction. They are the strange, mysterious, and unexplainable moments that shape our world.